So of course that's Nas,
Yeah.
and I am Arul, and we have known each other for many years now. And today,
Maybe 10 years.
maybe something like that, maybe 8-9 years or so. Yeah. And today, I've just invited Nas to have a conversation about some specific challenges I wanted to raise about Islam and about the Quran and so on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and today especially I'd like to focus on history.
Okay, sure. I'll try my best to answer.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea is that's fine. We try to have a reasonable conversation. If there are questions which you want to maybe take home,
Okay.
come back later to answer, that's all fine.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
cool. So in that, with that as the context, so can I please maybe make a case first?
Okay.
So did you want this to be timed, or are you all right with a flexible?
Normal conversation.
Normal
That's
conversation,
fine, yeah.
that's fine. So I make some points, I finish, and then I let you speak.
Okay.
That kind of thing, and then we take turns. Cool. So I think my main focus today is this. I think the religion of Islam, with all the people involved and places and so on involved, have plenty of historical problems.
Okay.
To an extent, I think Islam should not be considered seriously as a credible religion. So the foundations, historical foundations are shaky. That's my broad argument today. And there I'd like to actually make points about 4 broad areas. The first area is essentially the area of Islam's claim about itself. So Islam's claim about itself, I think there are a few different fundamental historical problems in these claims. That's point number 1. Broad area number 1. Broad area number 2 is Islam's claim about the Old Testament history. The Tanakh, the nation of Israel's history, has again fundamental historical issues. Thirdly, Islam's claim about the New Testament history, the person of Jesus and the rest of the New Testament history, again has a few fundamental issues. And then finally, that Islam's claim about some secular history outside of the nation of Israel also has some fundamental problems. To an extent, I think some of these claims essentially mean Islam could not be from God. Quran could not be from God, Muhammad could not be a prophet of God, that sort of thing. So that's my broad line of discussion. Maybe with that, can I maybe jump on to maybe a couple of detailed points?
Okay.
So the first point, remember the first major area I said, Islam's claim about himself has some fundamental issues. So in that area, can I please maybe look at a couple of different points. Point number 1, of course, Quran, Surah 2, Ayah 125 to 129, and Surah 3, Ayah 96, essentially refers to Abraham building Kaaba in Mecca as the house of God. Yeah, so that's a reference. There are a few other details, of course, in the passages I've quoted. Surah 2, 125 to 129, and 396. Mecca, Kaaba in Mecca. So if I could just stick to that first and then let you maybe respond to that. So the first challenge I'm posing before you is the primary source of information about Abraham is the Bible. The Bereshit, book of Bereshit, Genesis, the first book that Moses wrote. And there are plenty of details about the person of Abraham and his family line and so on. Plenty of details. Nowhere would you get any idea that Abraham went any close to Mecca. There are plenty of details, by the way, about the places he visited, the routes he took, and so on. And if you work out the details in the Bible, Abraham, the furthest south he got to in the Arabian Peninsula is maybe as far north as something like Petra, even if he got to Petra. But of course Petra wasn't around at that time. I'm talking about locations as opposed to the cities themselves. That is as far south as he got to in the Arabian Peninsula. Nowhere near Mecca. Though that's the detail that we have in the Bible. But of course, Quran has the audacity to claim that Abraham went all the way to Mecca to build it. So my point number one is I have counter evidences to suggest no, Abraham could not have done that. And now I'd like to ask you for evidences to support the claim Abraham went there, especially given the fact that since the nation of Israel became a free nation from the time of Moses until the time of Muhammad, there was at least how many years now? 2,200 years. I'd like to ask you for any evidence from those 2,200 years to suggest anything to an extent people of the nation of Israel took the Kaaba in Mecca seriously, if at all it existed, and paid the annual Hajj visit to Kaaba in Mecca. What kind of evidence is there for the nation of Israel doing that in those 2000?
Reference to that in the Quran?
No, anywhere before, sorry, I should clarify, not in the Quran but before the time of Quran. In the 2,200 years between the time of the free nation of Israel with the leadership of Moses and Joshua and so on, going up to
Mecca.
Muhammad's time.
Okay.
So of course Muhammad's time, you have this claim that suddenly Abraham built the Kaaba. Now prior to that,
Not Muhammad's time. You mean prior, like with
Yeah.
Abraham and Ishmael?
yeah. So yes, I'm talking about prior to.
Muhammad wasn't yet born yet.
Yeah, you can maybe stop with the time Muhammad. Let's say stop at 570 AD.
Oh, okay.
So let's consider only 1500 BC to 500 AD. And look for any evidence, because if Abraham built such a significant place, significant house of God in Mecca, so it's a significant thing, and therefore the nation of Israel would have taken that extremely seriously. So is there any evidence that you can suggest that actually the nation of Israel did consider something like this to be true and paid the annual pilgrimage? And on top of that, apart from the nation of Israel,
I'm not aware of the claim about Israel paying the annual pilgrimage to Mecca.
so I appreciate. So my point is this.
Is it Quranic verse or Hadith?
My point is this.
Okay.
If Abraham, so Quran claims Abraham built the Kaaba in Mecca. Quran, the verses that I quoted claims Abraham.
Paraphrase and yeah.
To paraphrase, Abraham built. Now Abraham is the patriarch, the first patriarch for the nation of Israel, a significant man. Wherever Abraham lived, whatever he did was significant for the entire nation of Israel. So if he founded what is called the house of God in this Mecca, called the Kaaba, that's a very significant thing. Yeah, and so my point is, if there is such a significant thing that happened by the hands of Abraham, then the nation of Israel would have taken it seriously, if that is true. Now, my contention is, of course, that is false. But assuming it is true,
my contention is it doesn't follow, because there can be rivalry between the two cousins, between the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac. Like in terms of like history being written by one and not the other, and the Bible tends to just focus upon the offspring of one son and not the offspring of the other. We're just told in the Bible in Genesis chapter 21 that Abraham left his mother along with his son Ishmael in Haran. And some traditions outside of the Bible and Quran have identified Quran as being south of Arabia, which is also incidentally the location of Mecca as well. In terms of like outside evidence, there's no outside evidence, for example, for the existence of Moses or Abraham or in general the patriarchs that the Bible mentions. But this would be like an argument from silence, and most of human history for the past. Is your view the world is like 6,000 years old, or are you like a younger age?
yes.
Okay. So the human history will be roughly what, about 6,000 years, and for the most part of that history of human civilization, we don't have any record. So like for example, if you take the time of Jesus, besides the New Testament, Josephus is our only first century source for Palestine. But in terms of the evidence for Mecca, we know that Arabs, they have a tradition among themselves. Their tradition was that Abraham built the Kaaba with his son Ishmael, and they also had the tradition of circumcision, which they consider that as the tradition of Abraham. So separate from the Bible, outside of the Bible, you have the Arabs preserving their own memory of Abraham, as well as what happened to his son Ishmael. We're just told in general terms in Genesis chapter 20 that God was with the lad as he grew up, i.e. Ishmael, and he grew up to be an anchor. Like he grew up to grow up as someone who builds bows and arrows, I think. I can't remember the exact, it's been a long time. But we're just told that God was with the lad as he grew up. So the Bible gives this kind of general kind of history, like in general terms. But in terms of the specifics, we find that the descendants of Ishmael, they preserve their own memory of Abraham, Ishmael, what happened. And in terms of the other thing was, sorry, just my memory isn't very good.
That's fine. So you're looking for the other
But it's fine. That would be my response. Like we look at extra biblical evidence as well as extra Quranic evidence, and there is like some sort of fall. Even what I actually remembered now was I was going to say, you may have heard of Anish Shirosh, the Palestinian Christian, and in his book he accepts the tradition that the Prophet Muhammad is a descendant of Ishmael, and obviously Ishmael being the son of Abraham. And so on that basis, I would say that the Arabs have their own memory of the history. Since the Bible doesn't really focus on Ishmael, more focus upon Isaac as well as his descendants, his 12 sons and the 12 tribes.
So you've made a very interesting point, which I would like to make in some other sort of context, which is the Bible, again, for very valid reasons, does not focus on Ishmael. For very valid reasons. There are a few details mentioned about Ishmael, but for very valid reasons, it doesn't focus on Ishmael. And the valid reasons, like what you said, rivalry, isn't true. The reasons given in the Bible,
history being written by the descendants of Isaac rather than descendants of Ishmael. We don't have any record of the Ishmaels in the Bible writing their own book, but we have many books written by the descendants of Isaac.
So that is your other problem, which is the information that I'm talking about comes from Jacob's house, and therefore that this might not be there. My problem is this.
So like David, Solomon, the authors of the Bible. The writers.
So my problem with that is this. The Bible has plenty of objective information about all sorts of other nations, number one. Number two, in the Bible I can quote a similar other event, just to see if your logic holds water. And a similar other incident, so maybe even before that. Yeah. Let me. So I heard your points. Let me respond to it in this particular way, which is.
You want paper, by the way, to make it easy for you to remember?
No, this is fine.
No, a spare pen as well.
No, this is fine. This is fine.
Okay.
Normally I just
you're more experienced than me, so you've been doing this.
No. It's just I sometimes note things on the phone. So
okay, cool.
Yeah. So my point is, so you mentioned about Abraham going to the wilderness of Paran. Now the wilderness of Paran, it's highly debatable. Where there are some particular details to suggest that wilderness of Paran does not actually extend any more south than, like what I said earlier, today what is Petra. Nothing beyond that is wilderness of Paran, according to some credible insights that are given. regardless, the point is this.
By the way, do you want to spend all our time focused just on this one point about Abraham and the Kaaba?
I just wanted to maybe
move on to something else as well?
yeah, just maybe one more exchange on this, and then we can move on to some of the other
It's
points.
up to you, I don't mind.
Yeah, just one more
If you
exchange.
just want to speak about this, that's fine.
That's fine. I don't want to be hung up on just one point.
Okay.
So maybe just a couple of more exchanges, and then we can move on to some of the other points.
Okay.
So I guess my point is the Bible gives plenty of details about Abraham's activities, including the mistakes he did, like calling his wife sister a couple of times and so on. There are things which are perhaps not doesn't add to the reputation of Abraham, but even those details are recorded in the Bible.
Well, he says he wasn't lying. She is his sister.
Yes, that is true.
Sister in faith or something like this.
Yeah, I mean, so there are other reasons
And he
for him
meant it that
to,
way.
but regardless, he was afraid. So which doesn't really show him in good light. Now, I mean, not a huge point, but the point is, for example, David. Some of the worst things that David did are recorded in the Bible. So the point, I don't really take this point that things which are not of Israel aren't taken seriously purely because of a rivalry. I'll give you another crucial example for that. The nation of Israel split into northern Israel and southern Judah. After King Solomon, after a brief time of Rehoboam being on the throne, the nation split into two.
Judah and Israel.
Judah and Israel, southern Judah and northern Israel. And at that time there was a crucial issue exactly similar to what you're talking about, which is Jerusalem was in southern Judah. And the northern tribes are in a separate country. The rulers of the northern tribes were now dealing with a political issue. If you let those people go and worship in Jerusalem, they might change their allegiance, because they need to go to Judah, and there is another king in Judah, and they were rivals. The point is, despite the rivalry,
you have the Samaritans as well.
that comes a bit later. Yeah, but that's after the split.
Okay.
Samaritans come. No,
There's a point about that because the companion to the Samaritan, they make mention that the Josephus, the way he represents the Samaritans, as well as the books of Kings, is not historically accurate, and they present them as being heretics or unbelievers or not being Jews. But today's studies show that the Samaritans are actually Jews coming from the son of Benjamin and as well as another tribe.
No, Samaritan history is a bit more complicated.
Okay.
So let's not get diverged. Yeah.
But you know the word Samaritan means someone who's keeper of the law or a law observer.
So Samaritans, if I can give you a simple example, Jesus himself appreciated Samaritans partially coming from Jacob. He himself appreciated. You might know to the Samaritan woman at the well, he said the woman essentially told.
To regard her as a Gentile, a non-Jew.
No, the woman told Jesus that she was getting. I mean, in the context, it was described that the well that she was using was a well that her father had dug up. Jacob had dug up. Jesus didn't contend that. Jesus was quite happy.
Reference to that? How did it know?
This is John chapter 3 or 4.
Okay, so that
4, I think.
something about him being the Messiah.
Yeah. And
Whether he's the Messiah.
yeah, and I think Jesus actually agreed that she was also a descendant of Jacob. So I don't think there was any problem there. So, but let's coming back to what I'm talking about. Abraham, Mecca, Kaaba, I think there is lack of evidence. The argument you are presenting is that because of sibling rivalry, maybe it might have been missed out. I think that's not a justifiable explanation because the point is the nation of Israel took Abraham extremely seriously. Sibling rivalry don't trump over the significance they had for Abraham, for Isaac, for Jacob, and so on. So, and therefore, any sibling rivalry would just make their lives difficult when they go to Mecca, Kaaba, on an annual Hajj, if they had to, if that place existed, if Abraham built that.
I'm not aware of any claim that people make that claim about it.
Exactly my point. My point is exactly.
I mean, like an Islamic or Muslim claim that Israelites used to make pilgrimage.
Yeah, that's exactly my point.
I've not heard that before.
But exactly my point. My point is, If let's pretend for a moment Abraham built it, I disagree with that. I think that doesn't have historical merit. But if we pretend for a moment Abraham did build Kaaba in Mecca, my point is, I don't know how you would know relatively reasonably, all right, the Jewish history. To them, the temple in Jerusalem is extremely serious. Extremely serious. When you consider,
That wasn't built by Abraham, that was built by Solomon.
yeah, but the point is when something is built by a,
allergy, when you go to a party for allergy.
when
Allergy when you rap.
when they appreciate when they appreciate
beat to the box.
when they appreciate that one of the significant persons in their leadership builds what is called the house of God, it's a significant thing for them. And like you exactly implicitly alluded, Abraham is much more significant than even King Solomon. Much more, because Abraham is the patriarch. He is the beginning point of the nation of Israel. Not Solomon. Solomon came later, even though he is a significant king. In other words, the point is, if the nation of Israel would take the temple in Jerusalem built by Solomon significantly, they would have taken anything that Abraham built much more significantly. If at all Abraham built this thing called the house of God.
I mean, there is reference to pilgrimage to the valley of Becca in the Psalms, and Becca is an ancient name for the city Mecca. So that could be one possible allusion, but you may have another explanation for that.
So
I think it's Psalms 18.
I mean, it's not hard to exactly get that quickly. I don't remember the exact chapter number, but I know the psalm you're referring to. I know what you're referring to, and I think that is wrong, because that particular psalm you have in mind, if I'm thinking, if I'm getting you right, precisely explains from Becca, how you could get to Zion, which is Jerusalem.
Sure.
And that,
they pass through the valley of Becca, which
and
is described as a place of spring.
And in the exact psalm, well, from the way you read the psalm, it is quite clear. When you reach Becca, you already are in Zion. In other words, you're already just close to Jerusalem. In other words, when you go through the details in the psalm, Becca is clearly a place in Jerusalem, well within Israel, nothing to do with Arabia. Now, I know
this could be like a relative kind of closeness, like back then how they would understand would be different from how nowadays we would understand.
No, back then their understanding would be more pessimistic, not more optimistic, because they didn't have faster transport. So today, if you call Glasgow as a city close to London, I appreciate. But if you call, but in those days, if you call Glasgow closer to City of London, they wouldn't appreciate, because that's maybe 10 days journey. In other words, closeness, world by then is bigger than what it is today. But even in that bigger world, they considered Zion to be, when you get to Becca, Zion is just there. That is the attitude they had when you go through the psalm. So I don't think, but I do know Muslims have tried to use that in reference to using historicity of Mecca, but I don't think that holds water based on the details which are in Psalms. So the point is, Abraham Kaaba is a story which completely goes against the historical significance of who Abraham was and how the nation of Israel would have taken anything that he builds. And I think, but this is something you might want to pursue further, I really think outside of the Quran, before the time of Quran, both from the nation of Israel and from the Arabs, you have, or anyone else, you have nowhere anything to suggest that Abraham built something like this and his descendants took it seriously. Nowhere.
It's an argument from silence.
It's not an argument from silence. So if you, sorry, did you cut it short?
Well, I was just going to say that even John's Gospel at the end mentions there were many other things that Jesus said and did, which if they were recorded, then even the world wouldn't be able to contain.
So my argument is certainly not an argument from silence.
Okay, sure.
I'm making two specific points. I am saying you can't give any evidence that Abraham built it from Israel, from Arabs, from the Arabs, or from any other nation. You can't. Is one point.
Like an argument from silence.
And that's why I'm making 2 points.
Okay.
That is one point I'm saying. You can't give any evidence. Point number one. Point number two, I can give you counter evidence. Bible has plenty of information of the life of Abraham. plenty of information. It's not as if Abraham's life is only in a couple of chapters. No, Genesis.
It is in a couple of chapters, like from Genesis chapter 15 to like about Genesis 30.
Yeah, but I don't know if you how much. So I have studied this in detail.
Okay.
At home, I prepared notes of prepared maps by my own hand of where Abraham went to, from where, and so on. I have a map. In other words, I can. There's plenty of, unless you draw a map or make some detailed notes, you wouldn't even realize how much detail there is in the book of Genesis. But the point I'm trying to make is there are plenty of details. Abraham, where did he come first? From there, where did he go? Northward, southward?
In terms of the locations of those places, I imagine they're disputed among biblical scholars because they're based upon extra biblical evidence.
Most places are not debated. Most places are well within Israel. The southernmost part within Israel that he came to was Beersheba. Beersheba.
How do you know the location of Beersheba? Does the Bible specifically tell us, or does it have to also be based upon like Josephus or other
No. Based on the Bible, based on. Oh no, I'm talking about information that the Bible gives about how long people took to get to where, from where, and so on. There are details about how long journeys took for those people. So based on some details which are already in the Bible, we can clearly see where things were. So certainly not Mecca, not even further south than something like Petra. At that time you didn't have a Petra, I'm just talking about a rough location.
Yeah.
Certainly not further south than that. So Arabians or the Arab land, at that time there were Arabians, by the way. That's another long story. Certainly not anywhere to what we call today as Arabian Peninsula. So that's my point number one. So this claim in the Quran that Abraham built, I think is completely wrong, unjustifiable. So that's point number one. Did you want to respond to that? I can move on.
Our response was just to go back to the Psalms, it's Psalm 84 verse 6.
Yep.
So if people want to look that up in their own time, they can.
Yep.
But in terms of just history being written by descendants of one son and not the other, and even in the example of where the northern and southern kingdom, you do see them having, like biblical scholars are of the view that the Israelites as well as the people that lived in Judah had their own record of their own history of the Torah and their own record of the history of the Israelites and also what they referred to as God. So the northern kingdom referred to God as Yahweh and the southern kingdom referred to God as Elohim, or vice versa. But the point being is that at some point in their history, these two texts get woven together, and hence you have, for example, two accounts of the flood, two creation accounts, two accounts of Moses, for example, and the burning bush. And each account you see different styles in vocabulary, as well as God being referred to by a different name, as well as in different chronological order or sequence of events. So I do feel that there is this kind of tension in the biblical text, and I do feel that there is enough room because Abraham lived for a very long time. He lived maybe up to 100 years old.
175.
So that is very long, and so the Bible gives us like a window of the life of Abraham, but within those 175 years there's still room for Abraham to visit his other son Ishmael, which his offspring kept a record or history within their own tradition.
Yeah, I heard what you said. So the different sources, the priestly source, there are a few different supposed sources. Those are not by any means
it's
actual.
A hypothesis.
Very fancy ideas, fantasy ideas, purely based on things, reasoning like, oh, this looks a bit different from that account, and therefore I think these are from two different sources. I think that's highly unjustifiable historically, and that's a different area that we could get to later. So I don't think that particular sort of argument would help. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the actual underlying points you're using in the argument, and I don't agree with the argument also. So I don't agree with the fact that I don't agree with the claim that there were multiple different sources, and I don't agree with the argument that those sources give you a bit of leeway to maneuver around here. Now, going to the Psalm 84 point that you were raising, here's the problem. So this is if I could read to the chief musician on an instrument of Gath, a psalm of the sons of Korah. This, of course, if you begin reading, how lovely is it? Is your tabernacle, O Lord of hosts? So this is clearly talking about the the pilgrimage of the nation of Israel going to the tabernacle of God.
Jerusalem, basically.
So the tabernacle of God is Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And if you read this, nation of Israel is
Verse 6, it says the pilgrims passed through the valley of Becca.
yeah. So this is my point. The
On the way to Jerusalem.
yes. So the nation of Israel, we know the boundary of nation of Israel.
Okay.
We know the boundary of nation of Israel. We know the
people.
We know the boundary of nation of Israel of the kingdom times. We know the boundaries. Yeah, I mean, we had the Edomites. Petra was Edomite. Petra was the capital of the Edomites. Petra, you had Ammon, Moab, you had the Midianites, you had the Amalekites, and so on. So we know reasonable boundaries of people groups were around Israel. So we know the boundary of the nation of Israel.
Okay.
Nothing to do with the Arabian Peninsula. So the nation of Israel now is going on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, which is within the nation of Israel. On the way is Becca. So if I read, how lovely is your tabernacle is how it begins, and then I'm skipping a few verses there. So maybe again go to verse 4. Blessed are those who dwell in your house; they will still be praising you. Blessed is the man whose strength is in you, whose heart is set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Becca, they make it a spring. The rain also covers it with pools. They go from strength to strength. Every one of them appears before God in Zion. So the idea conveyed here is they pass through the valley of Becca and they appear before Zion. Now, this is, the point is, from within Israel, when you want to go to the tabernacle, your tabernacle, the Jerusalem, temple in Jerusalem, you are in Becca, and the moment you are in Becca, you are there to present before Zion. So
I don't think this is given a geographical kind of information. This is the psalm, and this is like a pilgrimage psalm which they're singing. So it's not necessarily like meant to give like a historical, systematic.
okay, in which case, let's not use this for. In which case, let's not use this to justify this
like
is
important
Becca.
places like Becca as well as Zion.
No. The psalm is simple here. The psalm is explaining the feelings.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's describing the
Feelings of the people on the way or during their pilgrimage. So let's say like a travelogue. So their target is to get to Jerusalem.
You don't think this could just be the bridge of the journey? So like it's a song.
The bridges. My problem with your suggestion is nation within Israel is going to Jerusalem. Why do they care about going to Arabian Peninsula? That's completely off the mark. So what your
Maybe the attachment to Abraham.
no. Wait a second. No. So here, let's put it this way. Nowhere in the Bible would you find any reference to any attachment to Becca, some sort of special place in Becca which Israel has to go to. Nowhere would you find that. Yes. Becca in itself, by the way, the claim is Becca in itself is actually very close to Jerusalem even today. But so the point is, you are trying to use this to prove that that Becca is Mecca. But my point is, consider this purely as a travelogue.
Mecca is mentioned in the Quran as another name for Mecca.
Quran,
chapter 3, verse 9.
Yeah, Quran has plenty of.
Or 390.
So that's another major problem I would like to get to maybe some other time.
Okay,
which is Quran's details about Mecca is highly problematic. Quran's treatment of Mecca, highly problematic. But we'll get to that a bit later, please. Not today, please.
So also, I wouldn't mind moving on if you don't mind, because I feel I don't want to bore the audience with me.
What's up?
I feel like I'm becoming getting repetitive, so I don't want to like.
So maybe we can move on to another point
if you want.
Yeah, let's move on. Sorry. Yeah, maybe just a couple of back and forth.
Repeating the same thing. So.
Yeah, let's just couple of back and forth.
You've given me things to think about.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. So maybe the next point I like to make, maybe I'll skip. Maybe I'll go to a completely new area. claims about the Old Testament. Yeah. So, for example, let me read to you. If I could start with one example, Quran Surah 21, Ayah 60. If I could read that quickly, please. 21:60. So this is in reference to apparently Abraham burning down or destroying some idols. So this is Abraham destroying some idols. In that context is this particular verse, Surah 21, Ayah 60. It says, they said, we heard a youth make mention of them, who is called Abraham. So apparently, this is in reference to Abraham during the time of his father. Yeah, which is in Ur, Chaldeans, land of Chaldeans. And during the time of his father, in the land of Chaldeans, essentially doing some stuff like, I think, breaking some idols or so on. Yes, some idols. I shall circumvent the idols. So something to do with reducing to fragments, destroying idols. So that's what it is trying to describe. Whether it's historical even or not is a different story, and that's a different argument. I don't want to get into that now. My specific point is this. Verse number 60 says, they said, we heard a youth make mention of them, who is called Abraham. The question I like to ask you is, was Abraham known as Abraham at that time? He wasn't, according to the Bible. According to the Bible, Abraham became Abraham a long time later in the land of Canaan. When I don't agree, by the way, of the historicity of the breaking of idols and so on, I don't agree with that. But let's for a moment say we do agree. The problem with this narration is, apart from the historicity of the event, the problem is his name wasn't Abraham at that time, and therefore the people who saw and giving a report could not have said this guy is called Abraham. They couldn't have. His name was Abraham at that time, which is a completely different name. Very, very significantly different.
So my response will be similar to how apologetics responds to the objections that people make, that in, I think it's either Exodus chapter 3 or Exodus chapter 6, where God says to Abraham, I wasn't known as Yahweh, but I was known as God Almighty or Elohim. I can't remember the exact wordings of the verse, but you do find in Genesis Abraham calling upon the name Yahweh. So the response typically apologists give is that the author Moses is using this in a projectory sense. So like he's using it like for the readership of the Israelites, like they know God's name as Yahweh, so he's just kind of projecting this back into history. So in a similar, one possible answer to you, I'm not saying this is right, but this could be one possible response, is that when he's referred to as Abraham in that verse, since he was already known as Abraham to the audience of the Quran uses this name Abraham as a projector. So the issue isn't about what was Abraham's name. Was it Abraham or was it another name? But the main issue is that Abraham wasn't one of the idolaters. Like he didn't associate, other gods with Jehovah. So the Quran uses the name Abraham maybe in a projectory sense. Yeah. Since this was the name people knew him as.
Yeah, and that's a good argument. I appreciate that such an argument is made about Abraham using the name of Yahweh in the Old Testament. I think there are a few more details involved there, but that's not the discussion topic today. But I certainly hear your logic. There's only one tiny problem with that logic, and the tiny problem is there in the book of Genesis, and Exodus, it's the same author, Moses. The same author, Moses, knew about both the names. Yeah, he knew about Yahweh, he knew the name Yahweh, and he knew the name Elohim and the other ways in which Yahweh was known before that. He knew both, and therefore the one who knows both can retrofit. That I appreciate, that I understand. Here the problem is, like, if I could read this carefully again, here my problem is, it particularly says, they said. Who is the they here? The they here are the inhabitants of Chaldea, who are the neighbors, let's say neighbors, or whoever was around Abraham, testifying at that time. So the they there isn't Allah, isn't even Muhammad, isn't even Muslims. The they here are Chaldeans. And it says, they said, then bring him here. They said, we heard a youth make mention of them who is called Abraham. Now, the Bible could have used such a statement, even in reference to an event which happened when he was still known as Abraham. The Bible could possibly still use the name Abraham and get away with it because of the logic you mentioned. Because the Bible knows both the names. But the people of Chaldea would not have known the name Abraham at all. So they could not have used that name at all. The only name they would have known is Abraham. That's the only name. And therefore they could not have retrofit, assuming. So if the statement was something like, they thought it was Abraham. If that was a statement made here, they thought it's not a direct quotation, it's not a direct speech, it's an indirect, it's a statement in reference to Abraham. In that case, I can appreciate either the writer of the Quran or someone who came later took the liberty to retrofit a name. That would make sense, that I can appreciate. But here my point is, it's a direct speech. They said, we heard a youth make mention of them who is called Abraham.
My response to that would be, since the Quran is written in Arabic, and obviously people at the time weren't speaking Arabic, but they were speaking another language, and so the intent of the Quran is not to give, the exact quotation in that language and then translate it into Arabic, but the Quran is giving the meaning or the message of the story, which is that Abraham wasn't one of the idolaters. But if we are going to be that literal, then we can also be literal with the story in Genesis. Because it's not that it's not just Moses, the author, is using this name in a retro respect, but Abraham is literally praying and using the name of God, Yahweh, in his prayer to call to Yahweh. Even though Exodus says that I wasn't known by this name, Abraham. But if we take it literally, then yes, Abraham does seem to know this name, and he's using this name in his prayer to call out to Yahweh.
No, that
I'm
is
saying
not.
if we're going to be that literal, then we'll have that problem.
I'd like to be that literal. I'd like to be that literal. So I'm going to be literal in this regard.
Okay.
But unfortunately, your point about Genesis Abraham isn't accurate, because
Can I give you the reference? It's Genesis.
I know what
12.
you're talking about. I can give you the detail now. What it says there is that it's a new name, by the way. No one used that name, which is Yahweh Yireh.
Yeah.
Yireh. The fact is, God is provider. God is my provider. That's Mount Moriah. And if you wanted to get some, yeah, please go on. So essentially, the references in the
Yeah, sorry, it's actually Exodus chapter 6, it seems. The verse is verse 2.
Oh, yeah,
I appeared to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name Yahweh I wasn't known to them.
yeah.
So here he's saying that Exodus chapter 6 verse 3, that the name Yahweh wasn't known to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. But you do find, like, even in Genesis chapter 5, it was from the time of Seth, one of the early sons of Adam. It's from that time is when people began using the name Yahweh to call upon God.
No, you wouldn't find such a statement. You'd only find statements. I'll give you an example. One example is Abraham was asked to sacrifice Isaac in Mount Moriah. He goes to sacrifice Isaac, and at the end, of course, God changes his plan, gives a lamb in replacement for his son. Yeah, Nash. So gives a lamb in replacement for the son. Abraham sacrifices a lamb, and then it says he called the place Yahweh Yireh, Jehovah Jireh, Yahweh Yireh, where the focus is on the provision. God has provided for me. I don't think, if I remember correctly, I don't think it's a direct speech there. And more crucially also, so that's point number one. I don't think it's a direct speech. Point number two.
Here you have a direct speech in Genesis chapter 5, where Abel is quoted as saying, if I'm not mistaken, and he called his name Noah, saying, Genesis chapter 5 verse 29. This one will comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. So in his speech he uses the name Yahweh. Yahweh has cursed the ground on which I walk upon. But it does mention that it was from the time of one of the sons of Adam is when people began using the name Yahweh.
Call on the name of the Lord. Yeah, it says.
If you know what I'm referring to.
So that will be after Seth was born. So if you go to Seth, yeah, I do know. I thought it was after the birth of Seth. I can't unfortunately remember exactly now where the one you're talking about. They began to call on the name of the Lord. Again, the point there would be they began to call on the name of the Lord would not be a direct speech for me. So my point.
Well, it says it's from that time is when they used the name Yahweh.
Oh,
From the time
no. The statement, so if we get that statement, if we are going to disagree with that, if we get that statement, the idea that statement wants to communicate.
Genesis chapter 4 verse 26.
Yeah.
And then man
after
began
Seth
to
was
call
born.
on the name of the Lord.
Yeah, so essentially the idea there isn't, somehow I'm using the name Yahweh, but the idea is, until then, you know what happened so far. Yeah, Lamech, all the evil things that happened prior to that. Yeah, it's not a direct speech. It's not a direct speech. This is just a statement. That's what I said. If you're making a statement, I appreciate. This is what I said in the Quran also. If you're going to read a statement saying, if you're going to read a statement saying, they then accused Abraham, that I can appreciate. Yeah. So anyway, that's the point. That was the point I wanted to make there in regards to Abraham. So I think the Quran does not even know details to an extent of differentiating the two names of Abraham historically. I don't think the source of Quran, whoever wrote the Quran, knew about such a distinction. Yeah.
Okay, so here's an example, Genesis chapter 14 verse 22. But Abraham said to the king Sodom, I raise my hand to the Lord God Most High, the possessor of the heavens and the earth. So in his speech to the king, Abraham refers to God as Yahweh, Most High, the possessor of heaven and the earth. So this is like a direct speech with Genesis quotes. Genesis chapter 14 verse 22, where Abraham uses the name Yahweh when he's speaking to the king.
Okay, Nas. So I do take your challenge on this.
Okay.
Yeah, I do take this. I mean, I really need to.
I'm just saying, if you're going to bring up the point about Surah 21, about the name Abraham, then, like I said, the common response that I've heard from apologists is to say that this is using a retro sense. So could not we possibly also read the Quran as using this name as in a retro sense?
Yeah, okay. So I certainly take your challenge on that.
Okay. So
I'd like to.
chapter 14 verse 26.
Okay, so 14,
26.
26. Yeah, I certainly take your challenge on that.
Okay.
And
there's other examples as well. You can just
Yeah.
and you'll see with the speech quotation, you'll see the name Yahweh appearing.
Yeah, in the English with the quotation. But I certainly see your point. So I do take that challenge seriously. Let me take that back home, and then God strengthening. Next time we meet, we could. Shall we? Do you have some more time?
Exhausted.
Oh, you okay? All right, okay.
I didn't get that much sleep as well, but I'd like to carry on next time.
Yeah. So maybe next time we can carry on.
So I appreciate your demeanor. You're very bright and very friendly.
Well, thank you very much, Nas. Yeah, it's a good conversation. Thank you very much.
Many more,
and God strengthening many more. Yeah. See you later. Bye. Yes. Yes. So Nas was a nice gentleman to speak to, and of course the conversation we had was about how well Quran and Islam measures up against history. And I think Quran and Islam has plenty of problems in regards to history, and we were trying to speak about a couple of those problems today. And I think the significance of the problems are to an extent essentially once we appreciate that the Quran and Islam has got some of these historical facts wrong, we should really question the origin of the religion and the scriptures quite vigorously. I personally don't think Quran is from God. I don't think Muhammad is a messenger of God. If at all he existed as a historical person, I think there are plenty of fundamental problems in the religion of Islam, not the least of which are its problems against history. But Nas, I do appreciate one of the points I brought up last. Nas did bring up an equivalent sort of problem or challenge from the Bible also. Unfortunately, I wasn't well prepared to address that today. I'd like to take that challenge up as a sensible challenge that Nas has brought up. I'd like to take that as a homework, and God strengthening, come back to Nas, God strengthening next week, and follow up on that. But that's where we are. There are issues in the Quran and Islam. Thank you very much. Thank you.